Hi everyone, Sunnyvale here. I am very proud to present the very first episode of FECast, the official podcast of Friends of Eternal. In this podcast, I anticipate hosting sessions where I bring on a member of the team to be a guest on the show once every week. Hopefully we'll see how regular we can keep this, and talk about them and their involvement in the Eternal community. So this week was a very good excuse to get started with the podcast, as Noverb took second place in this weekend's ECQ and is going to be representing Friends of Eternal at Eternal Worlds, and well, I am very excited. So without any further ado, enjoy this episode of FEcast, and hopefully we'll be seeing you back for many, many more. Hello everyone, and welcome to FEcast, the official podcast of Friends of Eternal. It is finally happening. We are having a podcast. I've teased this for a while, and I'm really excited to get it out there. Here we are, recording a podcast. I am super hyped to introduce my guest, Noverb, who is an ECQ finalist from this past weekend, and is going to be a future Eternal Championship competitor. How are you doing, Noverb?
I'm doing great. I got very little sleep last night after a long day. I say long, but it was only 4 hours, but it felt like it was forever of playing some very intense Eternal. And I did way better than I thought I would. I'm very happy with it.
All right, so here's what we're going to be talking about on today's show. We're, of course, going to be going over the results of the ECQ and Noverb's triumph. We'll be talking about the spoilers from the upcoming campaign and a few things about that. And also, we're going to have a segment entitled Sunny's Sick of It, where I give my take on something that I'm not happy about. Well, some controversial Reddit posts that happened in the past week. Alright, so let's talk about you, Noverb. Tell us a little bit about your background in card games. You're not a household name yet in Eternal, but after this weekend, who knows? So give everyone out there a little bit about who you are and where you're coming from as far as card games go.
So, hi, I'm Noverb. I'm Nathan, but my the name is Noverb on basically every online thing that I do. My card game background is pretty heavy into Magic, but not heavily competitive. I've been playing Magic since Lorwyn when I was like 12, 13, and the best I did with Magic was like a 6-3 at Grand Prix Las Vegas for Modern Masters 2, back when 6-3 didn't debut. And then nowadays I just play Draft on Arena and Commander at the kitchen table. For other competitive card games, I did a little stint of playing Pokemon, going to a regionals. I played a big card game for 2 years and went to both of their world championships. Rest in peace, and/or I hope they get a resurrection soon, because they haven't been that active in the past year, but they are slowly resurrecting.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Epic Card Game. I think a lot of us have a lot of experience of Magic the Gathering. And by the way, I was also at the GP in Las Vegas Modern Masters too. That was a good one. But tell us a little bit about Epic Card Game. What's it like?
So Epic is made by Rob Doherty and Darwin Castle, two Magic Hall of Famers, and it is very much taken from Magic, where it's your usual dude battler where you play units, try to attack their face. The main difference is that there's no resource in your deck. Your resource is gold, where each player gets 1 gold each turn, and if you don't use that gold, it goes away. So the resource cost system is very binary. It's either a card costs 1 or it costs nothing. And that means the cards that cost 1 are the top end, like the best of the line cards, and they're like late game Magic cards that are equivalent to things like, Inferno Titan, or those like big end game cards that you're playing on turn 1 immediately. So right out the gates, you're like playing Vintage or Legacy. It's competitive, it's very tempo based, and decisions matter a whole lot more because you're never going to draw land. So it's very easily my favorite card game, but as I said, the game has been a little bit dead in the water for the last year.
Right. Okay. Cool. I'll keep my eye out on for that, and so will the people listening at home, I'm sure. All right. So, when did you get into Eternal? What's your experience with it? What have you been up to? You've played a few ETSs, and you've been in the top 64 of a previous ECQ. Is that correct?
Yes. So I started playing Eternal back in beta very early on, enough to have that the diamond back for their veterans card back. I don't know what the actual time frame on that was. I didn't play very competitively at that time, though. It was more just, every other weekend I'd get on and play a few games. I'd buy the campaigns when they came out and come back whenever a campaign came out, until just very recently in December I heard that Eternal was getting World Championships, and there was quite a few lines where the average Joe could throw their hat into the ring, and I tried every outlet that I could to do so, including starting the ETSs, which I didn't do very well, and since I was a month behind everyone else, I was missing most of the season, didn't get into the Invitational, and my poor records in the ETSs didn't do much for my community championships odds either. I've played in 3 ECQs, starting in January. My first one was an okay run. I went 17-11, which barely missed the top 64. My second run, I went 21-7.
Nice.
And I was very happy with that. And then I lost in round 2, which is the top 32, to an insane Yeti start 2 times in a row. And so sometimes you just get aggroed out.
And that was the one we were playing Yen of Peaks for, right?
That's the one where you were playing Geneva Peaks for. Myself and Barefoot were on a FGS list that was shipped to me by Neon, but the original creator was Lights Out Ace.
Right. Okay, I remember this conversation again. Okay, and this one, all those past results that were somewhat unsatisfactory, or I don't know about unsatisfactory, but they don't matter at all anymore, because now you're qualified and you're going to have. Right. An equal shot at whatever the first prize is. I imagine it's half the total prize pool, but I don't know if they've announced an official prize structure for Worlds. But it's very exciting. It's going to be amazing having representation of Friends of Eternal at Worlds. Avian, one of the finalists of last month's ECQ, also is on Friends of Eternal, but he didn't join until after. But it was great to have the experience of the entire team cheering you on the entire way as you were able to essentially take the tournament down.
We're very happy to have 2 Friends of Eternal members, hopefully getting more. But 2 out of 16 is already a great number for a presentation.
Yeah, that's insane. I couldn't be prouder of what the team's done so far. It's only been a couple months.
Right. And what you were saying about it all not mattering, I think it all did matter over the games that I've played, the tournaments that I've played in. They've all taught me a lot of things, and I was able to learn more play styles, learn the Genève deck, which I wasn't very comfortable with before this event. I had played, I want to say, 30 games total of it lifetime that helped me kind of get into the top 100 of Masters, but that didn't work out, so I kept on switching other decks. Let's talk about our testing process, because I know we tested separately. What was your testing like?
Yeah, so unlike last month, where I landed on this deck and found a good build of it very quickly with the 8 merchants and the power in the market, it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to play in this tournament. I knew that I was probably going to play FTP or FJS, because I think that those are just both very versatile decks and very powerful and can tangle with anything that the metagame might throw at you. So I tested out many builds of those. I also tried a Skycrag version of FTP, but I was not very successful. I mean, I went through a lot of different iterations. Yeah, I know you don't use Twitter, but last night, or sorry, not last night, the night before the tournament, I had a streak where I was 2-14 with the tournament. The next morning, I just didn't know what deck to play. So I made a Twitter post that said, I have a tournament tomorrow, I'm 2-14, in my last 16 games, AMA. I just didn't know what to do. Eventually, I came to the idea of using Derry Cathane as a way to pressure sites, to slow down sites, because when you're playing against FJS and FTP, which I thought were going to be the main players of the tournament, and that turned out to be correct, you really need a way to pressure sites, because sites are more often than not what swings the game in one player's favor. I guess maybe not like always, but a good amount of the time when the game goes into late game, the sites are what swings games in one player's favor. So Derry Cathane is a nice way to delay the expensive sites like Howling Peak or Dizo's Office, or even Regent's Tomb costing one more can be a big deal. And then just having a 0-4 that can turn into a 4-4 and attack with Overwhelm is a big deal when it comes to pressuring sites for a very low cost. So that's why Derry was good. And Derry is also very good against decks where you need to block a lot, such as the Mall deck and Haunted Highway, and it doesn't usually do that much against Rakano. But yeah, anytime you need to block a 3-2 or 2-2 or 2-1 or whatever, Derry does a pretty good job at that.
In terms of ankle cutter.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see very many ankle cutters. I don't know if you did.
I saw one, but I saw the same, like, I had the same amount of testing, not same amount, but like same kind of testing that you did, where I came onto the fact that, once again, I think FGS and FTP were the metagame calls, and you wanted a deck that would be good against them, but also be good against a random field of like aggro or anything someone would throw at you. So I think FTP and FGS were good calls, even though people knew we were going to be on them. When you're coming down to those, though, I think you want to be on FTP because FTP preys on FGS a good amount of the games. But what it turns out to be was that, like, I was testing and I didn't know what build of FTP to play, because from this invitational, there were two big versions of the deck that came out. There was this 4 Howling Peak in the main with, what is that card called? The 2-4 Blitz.
Amaran Stinger.
Amaran Stinger. There was that version of the deck, and then there was your version from last month with the 8 merchants, peak in the markets, and a more mid-range game plan with the peak out when you were ready for it.
Yeah.
So when I was looking at the possible options, I really liked having the 4 peaks in this current meta because it's very good in the mirror. Being able to copy your Heart of the Vaults or get extra Sandstorm Titans just helps you push through more damage over time and let your burn spells eat up the rest of their face.
Yeah, the peaks absolutely swing the mirror, and I think you need access to more than one of them, because previously with the mid-range version, with just the 1 peak that you could get every game with your merchants, that was good against decks that weren't well set up that weren't prepared for peaks, right? But now that everyone knows that the peaks are coming, like, using just 1 peaks in the game isn't going to be enough. They can use Display of Ambition, kill it, and then play multiple peaks of their own to catch back up in the game. So, I mean, that was a big thing, is having multiple peaks. As far as Amaran Stinger goes, I didn't like it in FTP because you didn't have a way of capitalizing on the fact that you had all these 1/1 deadlies. Sure, it was good to have them in certain matchups, but there's no real way to make those cards really powerful the way that the Shimmer Pack or the Xenon Sights deck does with Xenon Initiation.
Right. And then there's also that idea that you're not assured to even get the Stinger's Scorpions in the first place.
Yes.
Because you have to hit 2 barriers. You have to hit the barrier of hitting them in the face with this Stinger through merchants or whatever blockers, and then you also have to have them draw the Scorpion tokens, which is a little bit hard nowadays because of things like Strategize and the scouting powers, the crest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's hard. It's just not entirely reliable. Like, it's probably going to happen, but it might not.
Yeah. But you're not always going to get all 5, and you're not going to get them when you need them. They're going to happen randomly.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really sure what to be. I knew I wanted the 4 peaks, but I didn't know what the exact list I wanted was until I saw your list the morning of Friday. Because you posted this list with like 3 dairies in it, and then I was like looking for what you cut for the dairies, and then I saw there were no Moonstone Vanguards. And I really liked that a lot, because in my testing, Moonstone Vanguards, while good against aggro, made you very susceptible to specific aggro matchups like Maul and Haunted Highway. Maul because you have a bunch of vanishing and other like unsummon effects.
Yeah,
that just totally tempo you out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's also the Haunted Highway matchups that the Moonstone Vanguard becomes a bit of a disadvantage because they have Madness, and they just take your Moonstone Vanguard, attack with it, draw a card. You're forced to block it, or they're just going to what is that? The sacrifice and then kill their unit.
Combust. Yeah,
Combust.
I mean, I think the dream is for the Haunted Highway player is to madness the Moonstone Vanguard, draw the power you need for the combust in your hand, and then combust it after combat.
Right. I know in my testing, the specific thing that turned me off from Moonstone Vanguard was just like my opponent madness is my Moonstone Vanguard after I go Titan into Moonstone Vanguard, and then I realized that I either block my Moonstone Vanguard to kill it, or they're just going to sacrifice it to kill Sandstorm Titan anyway. So I had to kill my own Moonstone Vanguard for no value. And then realizing what you're cutting for this dairy, like the dairy does exactly what you want against those two matchups that I said Moonstone Vanguard was bad against, while also helping out in the metagame as a whole. Because dairy is a blocker that they don't really want to combust. They don't really want to spend removal on because of 0-4 until you pay that 3 power. Against Maul, you get to turn Maul into a 7-cost spell.
Yeah, and which is basically impossible to play in that deck.
Right. Or if it is, it gets you to a point where you can empty out your hand before it matters.
Yes.
So I think that Dairy was the perfect call, especially against those decks. And I did face 3 Mauls in my Swiss rounds, and Dairy was an all-star every single time.
Let's talk about one other point of contention that some people had with the deck list. We had 4 Peaks main, obviously, but only 1 display, and that was in the market. So my argument, display is very clearly a strong card. Like, I don't think anyone is going to contest that fact. It's very versatile, all the modes are pretty good, and it's clearly a card that's, like, very constructed playable. And having only 1 copy of it confused some people, but I think that having only 1 copy of it in the market, or having 1 copy in the market that you could get access to pretty easily, was good, because its power comes from being played right at that moment you need it, like to counter, to negate the Grasping at Shadows, or to negate the Harsh Rule, or to
kill the Statuary Maiden.
Yeah, to kill Statuary Maiden. God, Statuary Maiden was a problem card the entire tournament for me. Some people were surprised about that, but I think that the 1 copy was all you needed. You felt that way as well?
I agree. When I was first looking over, I didn't actually realize that change was made, because I was just like looking over it very quickly. Then I realized, wait, there's only 1 display and it's in the market. That's a little bit weird. It took me about like 10-20 minutes to like math out when and why I would need that. And then when I was in my rounds, I started to realize that you do want the display in the market, because you want to have it exactly when you need it, as opposed to have an abundance of them when you don't need it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like sometimes display is just a burn spell, and the deck doesn't want that all the time. This is like Genève Peaks is more of a mid-range style game plan where you're trying to go like Merchant into Sandstorm Titan into like Merchant plus Spell into Heart of the Vault or Peaks.
Or Peaks, yeah. And there's no room for display in that sequence that you just described.
Right. So the only time that you're leaving up those displays is when you want to counter the Harsh Rule, or you want to counter the Grasp of Darkness. So you have to leave them open at certain turns plus, so you want to make sure they're there at those times and only those times, which I think is just the perfect way to put them in the market. You have 8 merchants, you can grab it whenever you need it, and you'll have it for that specific circumstance, or in some cases the burn. And in some very, very corner cases, the return the Heart of the Vault to your hand to replay it and gain 6 life.
Yeah, but even then, it's such a tempo negative play that you would only want 1. All right, let's talk about yesterday. So we've got our deck choice. We know that yesterday went very well for you. Tell us a little about it. What happened?
So I was very stressed going into round 1 because the standings were posted, and I realized that me being 5th on the ladder going into it, I was paired against 60, and the person who ended up being number 60 was the Overmaster. His name has like a renown and reputation that comes like that precedes him. So I never actually played against him or talked to him, but I was very in my own head about it. And it did end up being one of the best games I've played, where in game 1 we had a somewhat close game. I ended up winning. In the second game, I was a little bit locked on power, where I only hit my 4th and never hit a 5th until like turn 8 or something. And then the game 3, the Overmaster was locked in at 5 power for the entire game, but had 2 Howling Peak Smugglers and a bunch of burn that made it a very intense game that came down to me torching a Howling Peak smuggler in response to his display for 6 while I was at like 17. And then he had another display that ended up countering, but I ended the game at like 4 life. It was so stressful.
Those smugglers do a lot, especially in the mirror.
Right.
Getting one off the board is so critical. Did you ever get to blow one out, like as if he tried to like snowball one of your smugglers with the smuggler out? Or it was just mitigating damage the entire time?
It was mitigating damage for the most part. I think he is a good enough player to play around that, but I did do that in the Swiss a few times. There was like a snowball on my smuggler, and I was able to like equivocate their smuggler in response or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Smuggler advantage, it matters.
Yeah, that smuggler is so busted. And the interview for like when you make top 64, Direwolf Digital sends you an email that says like, fill out this interview so the casters know what to talk about when they're talking about you. And one of the questions is, what is the best card in your deck? And I put down Howling Peak Smuggler because of the differences in gameplay it allows you to do.
Absolutely.
Because Howling Peak with a gun down at 6 instead of 5 matters for countless cards, like Vara, Heart of the Vault, Sandstorm Titan,
Joe.
All those like huge, Joe, all those huge things that matter in the metagame. And then there's also just those corner case scenarios where your opponent's at like 13 and you have 2 Howling Peak Smugglers up because you have this Howling Peak that copied it, and then you go Caleb's Favor and Display and Torch and they're dead.
Yep. Alright, so you beat the Overmaster, and you said that if you were able to beat him, you'd be able to coast him to the top 8. Is that pretty much what happened?
That is what happened, and that was my call, but that wasn't a call based on the decks I was playing. It was more on the, I just looked at all the brackets and realized that I just happened to be in that bracket with a very few amounts of, big-name players, where, the bracket directly below me had people like Ruark, Notorious GHP, Kamado, the guy who ended up winning the tournament, Collector. All of them were just in this one bracket together, and they just, knocked each other out of contention. And that's where a few of our other Friends of Eternal players were in that bracket as well. But I had the fortunate stance of being in the bracket I was, having good matchups because I played FTP in round 1 and 2, and then FGS in round 3, 4, 5. And those were the matchups I tested the most. So they were the matchups I was most comfortable in, and I knew the lines the best. And when that happened, it just all, dominoes all fall into place, and I managed to hit in the top 8. And then I played against Kamado in some very quick games. One of them had something to do with him being stuck on power, I believe. But they were just very quick, and I didn't have many notes for that game itself. And then you guys know what happened in the top 4 and finals. We can talk about those if you want to.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got sweet revenge against Stealth for me, who beat me in the first round. And I won't dwell on that match too much, but so there was a really tense moment in Game 3.
Yeah, so there was a Razan that I had permafrosted earlier, and a Great Valley Smuggler that I assumed had gotten a Deep Forge plate in play. I play a Heart of the Vault, killing the Smuggler, drawing an Equivocate for 0 that I know is just going to put me in favor of the game no matter what. He then plays another Razan, hitting my face down to 11. I play a Peak, which then gun downs his Razan that isn't permafrosted, and the board is Peak and Heart on my side, and he has a permafrost Razan. Next turn, he goes for the Deep Forge plate on his permafrosted Razan that would have brought me down to 1 life, but I was able to equivocate that for 0, and then that Peak went on to copy the Heart of the Vault and put me in a strong lead, in which I just followed it up with a Merchant for a counterspell for the follow-up Parse rule, and won the game pretty handily. But that Equivocate was a great thing to rip off of the Heart of the Vault.
When you drew that Equivocate, the 0-cost Equivocate out of the Heart of the Vault, I knew it was like, this game is over. We're sending another FE member to the Eternal Worlds. Oh, I was so excited. And then you unfortunately lost in the finals, but that's okay, I guess. You still get to participate in a 16-man tournament for $100,000, so that's beyond exciting. I'm not actually sure if they are planning on flying out the competitors to Denver, but if they are, I'll definitely book my own plane ticket just to hang out with everyone. I think it would be super awesome to get a gathering together.
Yeah, I would love a team picture at some point. If we'll have like team shirts or whatever swag that we're going to end up making for the Worlds.
Yeah, well, I mean, not just even beyond just Friends of Eternal, just the entire Eternal community or members from different parts of the Eternal community. I think it would be great to hang out. So hopefully we can look forward to that coming up in the near future. So congratulations. All right, let's talk about some news. We had some spoilers of the new campaign, which is supposed to drop within the next 2 weeks. So let's talk about that for a second. The first spoiler that they gave us last week, Vargo Redclaw. It's a 4-cost unit, 5/4 that requires Fire, Justice, and Primal. It has Pledge, and it says Vargo cannot be killed except by damage or loss of life. This is a really interesting card. You can play it and then immediately Harsh Rule, and it'll stick around. If you Haunting Scream it, it'll stick around after the Haunting Scream. I think this is going to see some play. I don't know if it's going to be format warping because it requires 3 factions, and it's a bit smaller than other 4-drops such as Vara or Sandstorm Titan, but I think in the right metagame that has a lot of cards that just kill units, it is going to be good. And who knows, maybe it'll birth a Scream deck that uses it in interesting ways. What do you think?
I'm very excited for Vargo into Harsh Rule. I'm very excited for Scream, whether it be 4-faction or just like discarding Vargo to Crunch or something like that. But mostly I'm just excited to see what this does to the metagame in itself, because decks like FJS are playing, Vanquish, they're playing Slay, they're playing Harsh Rule in the market or in the main, depending on which version you have. And Vargo just does not die to those. It's going to be a force to be reckoned with against stuff like FGS. The downside is it only has 4 HP. So it still dies to things like it trades with Razan. It dies to Great Valley Smuggler, the red-green one with double damage.
Yeah.
Which is not good against
FJS. But you point out a good point that it blanks so much of their removal. I think we're going to get a new meme, and it's going to be called Bear Don't Care, where Vargo just doesn't care about the removal that people are playing.
I mean, I looked up, Googled, Eternal spoilers or something like that, just to figure out what card was spoiled, and I couldn't find an actual card image. I just found this meme of Gandalf saying, Gandalf with like Slay on his face, and he's like, "You shall not pass," and then Vargo's like, crashing through. He's like, "No, run!" And Vargo is what is that demon called in Lord of the Rings?
Balrog?
Balrog, there you go. I'm bad with names. You should have figured this out by the 20 minutes we've already been talking.
All right, so we expect that to make an impact on the meta. There's another card, Andric, Renegade Priest. It's a 4-cost, Time, Justice, Shadow. I wonder if this is part of a cycle. It seems like it very well.
I really hope it's not. Personally, I hope there is an Ixtun, a Krendon, and what is the Elysian black one? The Dark Maw colors. Aurelian. So I wish there's just those 3, so those 3 factions get a buff with some new tech.
Oh yeah.
And then leave out the
ones that are already doing well.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting. Anyway, so Andric, Renegade Priest is a 2/4 with Pledge, another tri-faction Pledge card. That actually seems like a bigger deal than I think people are going to realize.
Right.
Whenever a player draws an additional card, increase its cost by 3. Either player. So that means going to the market, drawing extra cards, and echo cards. Snowballs from the Odin Hurler are going to be more expensive. And it also has Empower, give another one of your units +4/+2 until end of turn. That's a pretty big buff. You talked about possibly playing this with the Berserk. I think that's a bit much, but I think there are some curves that you can think of that are pretty incredible with this card.
Yeah, look, when stakes are not high, like when I'm not playing in an ECQ, I like to play dumb stuff. So I would love to play Andric with a deck with like Hojan, Seraph Speaking, him, and then like maybe Dusk Raider in the mix somewhere, like where you splash black in this or splash shadow in this
like a blitz deck, right?
Yeah. And it's like there's the temporal blitz combo with student of some kind, the double damage if you cast a spell. So
Oh
I
yeah,
feel like
Rilgun's Disciple.
Rilgon's Disciple. There you go. I feel like that deck could somehow play Endrick by splashing it, and then just empower twice up a Hojan to give him +8 on top of whatever else he is, and just kill them on turn 4.
Yeah,
You know,
that seems pretty incredible. All right, so we expect both these cards to make an impact, or at least show their face in Constructed, have a presence in Constructed. They are triple faction, so it's unlikely that they're going to be as prevalent as, say, Sandstorm Titan or Vara, but I think we're going to see... This is not the last that we're going to see them. And one other note about the campaign is it is going to be pre-constructed decks instead of bringing your own deck, which is an interesting change. We'll see how that plays out. I actually liked brewing decks for specific missions and taking advantage of the special rule set, but I think it's also going to be having it's going to be fun to have a challenge.
Sure.
For each
most
individual.
of the campaigns I crushed with like Skycrag aggro, except for the final one where I had a lot of fun with the Azendel fight. That was a really cool one.
You could do some really fun stuff there.
And you can always go back and like remake decks to try those like weird modes. But I don't know how happy I'm going to be with, or I don't know me personally, but you know, if somebody's coming back to the game and they want to just jump back into Constructed, I know doing campaigns is a little bit of a tedious task to finish it off. So if you're on a handicap with these like less than optimal decks, it may be a little annoying.
Yeah.
At the cost of flavor.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. We'll see how it turns out. I mean, maybe the decks are just totally sweet every time, and it's not a matter of difficulty. It's just a matter of this deck is really sweet to play in this scenario. So we'll see how that turns out.
It could also help new players by like giving them cool ideas for decks.
Oh yeah, definitely. Ooh, that's good. Okay, so 2 other cool news items is that we have Eternal on Switch coming out over the summer. Switch is a great console. Now you can play in bed on a big screen TV, or you can play it on the go. It's I just think that's a fantastic addition. I'm really excited to potentially also have a new more of an audience for Eternal. And also we have patch 1.44, which is deck customization. Here you can designate specific totems, avatars, and card backs for your decks. I think that's really cool. Not personally into it, but I know that customization is a big part of like Magic. People care a lot about their basic land arts and various card arts and foils and whatnot, and like even sleeves potentially, and like a playmat. So being able to customize that, I think, is a gigantic step in the right direction.
Right. I'm with you on the I don't think it's for me personally, because I don't spend a lot of money/gems on totems. The avatar I always use is either Nyctotraxian or Jotun Hurler. It's mostly Jotun Hurler. But Nycto has that cool special emote that I like. Cardbacks is pretty cool, but I'm personally not going to come off of the veteran card back.
Yeah, it's hard to top the veteran card back.
Right. I don't have the Amber one, but Diamond is good enough. The one thing, or Diamond or Masters? It's the purple one. Diamond is the one below Masters, right? So I have the Masters one.
Isn't the Amber one the Masters one, or am I mistaken? No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're right.
I think it goes like bronze, silver, gold, diamond, Masters, then the like early beta.
Legendary,
Amber.
I guess, is what it's the legendary color, right?
Right. So the only thing that I can really see this affecting is like the people who have purchased a lot of different totems, and they only really get to use one because of how tedious it is to change the totems in between games. And now you can just lock totems to your decks, which seems like a quality of life change. And
yeah, it sounds great. Cool. It sounds great for the people that are going to enjoy it. So I great job, Direwolf. Keep on making this game great for as many people as possible. Okay, now on to Sunny's Sick of It. So this is going to be a recurring segment where I go to the Eternal subreddit and search for controversial posts and give my take on it. So I actually have made the most controversial post of the week, where I was talking about how I like the influence store, but I think everyone is pretty sick of me talking about the influence store, judging on other people's comments on that. So I'm going to skip over that and go to a thread entitled "Display of Ambitious is so ridiculously unbalanced," and I'll read it out for you. So here is the body of the post. How did anyone think giving out a double dark return for essentially no penalty was a good idea? And beyond that, putting into a color set that has an absurd amount of OP cards to begin with? It just makes playing against FJS into an exercise of futility if you can't close them out in the first 10 turns of the game. As a side note, Twitch is one of the most cancerous things to ever hit online card games. Getting roped every turn so some wannabe celebrity can explain their every move to their 50 viewers is one of the more annoying aspects of digital CCGs. Of course, DWD put all of their eggs in this basket. And that's the end of the post. So, I just love how this post, which is ostensibly complaining about card balance, just goes off on this Twitch drops are terrible, or like Twitch streamers are terrible, or playing against people that are streaming Twitch is really bad because you get roped every turn, which is like a gross exaggeration. I was roping every turn of the ECQ just because I was thinking about my plays. Anyway, and calling streamers wannabe celebrities. Oh my god, people, I mean, the Twitch community is fantastic. I think that overall Twitch is a gigantic, huge impact on most games because it gives people a community that they can go to interact with and play a game together. And I just think that's generally a good thing. And someone having such a negative view on Twitch and inserting it into this post that is entitled "Display of Ambitious" is so ridiculously unbalanced. To me, is just absurd. But onto the main body of their post, what they're trying to get across about display of ambition. One could argue that it is powerful and very versatile. But no, just talking about the double dark return being the OP factor is something. I mean, you play Magic, so how many double dark returns or double raised deads have we seen in that game that just are not good in Constructed, or never good?
Well, there's been like at least 5 in limited sets over the course of like the last 2 years. But I think the main difference here for double dark return is that in Eternal, the stat lines and the modified parts of the cards are saved when you go into the Void, which is not something that any other card game that I know of does. So just having the Disentomb Dark Return effect be that much better because the cards are better since you last played them, and then they get whatever more buffs that you will give them when you replay them, makes it a lot stronger. Like there is a cool interaction with Revenge and Destiny that allows you to play them from your discard pile and then draw on like 1 or 2 more cards depending on how many Revenge units you get. And there's like the interaction with Vara where Vara becomes, if it was a 5/6, it becomes a 7/8 next time you play it. Just, it's a lot better in this game than other games. And it is probably the best card in the FGS decks. But, yeah, but I don't.
On the other hand, the game gives us tools to combat that. I mean, there are lots of things that lock things in the Void. But aside from that, we also get things like Statuary Maiden, which transforms the cards, or things like Feeding Time, or there are other cards that give permanent negative stat effects that make cards like this much worse than they would be in other card games because the cards don't reset to their original values.
Like the Shadow Wrath that reduces the
Strain to Shadow.
0. Yeah, they are reduced by -4, right?
Yeah,
Strain
-4 health.
That's a really good example of that.
Yeah, so I oh my god. So, like, I mean, there is an argument that could be made that Display of Ambition is very good and does too much, but I think that harping on the double Dark Return aspect of it as being, your main argument for why the card is too good is a bit much for me.
Yeah, I think this is just another case of someone who just wants to complain and doesn't want to think about the card game critically. Because really all you had to do was say, okay, so I'm complaining about Dark Return. How can I attack Dark Return with the decks that I play? Cool, you can play Statuary Maiden. Cool, you could play Gavel if you're playing the Mirror, or if you're playing like a I don't know, what else play Gavel? Like Combray plays Gavel sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you can play Reality Warden, you can play Gavel in your market. There's just a lot of things that you can do. One of the great things about Eternal is that if there's a strategy that is really annoying you, there's always, even if the strategy is really good, there's always a way to attack that strategy. Now, there might not be a way to attack that strategy and other strategies, but...
yeah, sometimes you have to pick your losses.
Yeah, you really do.
Like, going into this ECQ with FTP Genève, one of the losses that you pick is probably Reanimator. Like, we don't really have a great way to handle that, especially with only one display.
Or,
so, like,
or another one that you really pick is Shimmer Pack, as you found out in the finals.
Right.
I don't think that matchup is good at all.
You have to draw very well, and you have to play very well, as I showed. But then sometimes you just get got, and sometimes you just draw poorly. Like,
yeah,
it happens.
It's not a good matchup. They're well equipped to deal with FTP Presents. Anyway, that's enough of that. Please, if you are going to make posts about cards being overpowered or strategies being overpowered, don't come off just being salty. Present strong arguments for your case. Otherwise, you're going to frustrate me and possibly other people.
And you may appear on this podcast.
You may, or come up with the most unreasonable take that you can, and maybe you'll appear on this podcast if that's what you're into. All right, thanks everyone for listening. I'm going to talk about what's coming up just a little bit. The campaign obviously is going to drop in the next few weeks, so be on the lookout for that. Friends of Eternal hoodies and tees are, well, the ball is rolling. We don't have a set date or anything for it, or there's no order link yet, but that will be happening. We got a logo sent to us generously from LT3K, just totally unprompted, just sent me a logo that we could use for Friends of Eternal, and there was some back and forth for it, but we have that. That's going to appear on the apparel. I'm super excited to that, and gigantic shout out to LT3K for that. Also, this podcast, that's something to be excited about. I don't know how frequent this is. I don't know if I'm going to be hosting it every time. But boy, I'm really excited to have Friends of Eternal podcast because that was one of the things that I wanted to do when I started this team. Yes, and Noverb, any plugs that you would like to make? So if listeners want to hear more from you or learn from a Eternal Championship competitor like yourself?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be a one-time guest on this podcast or a recurring host, but if you want to find me otherwise, you can find me sometimes on Twitch. I'll probably be streaming more often now because I have, looks like kind of a following, I guess, from this event on twitch.tv/noverb. You can go ahead and follow me on there. I don't have a sub button or anything like that. I'm not a cool cat yet. You can't find me on Twitch. Well, you can. I just don't use it, so maybe in the future I'll get to using that more often.
On Twitter.
Or Twitter, yeah, sorry.
Yes.
And then if you want to find me on Discord, I am noverb #2385, and on Eternal, I am noverb plus 5160.
All right, yeah, so if you want to see what it takes to win an ECQ, go check those out. I'm looking forward to catching your stream at some point. Everyone else, thanks for listening. I hope this is the first in many episodes of FECast. I can't wait to continue this series. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Look out for us in the future, and until then, I will see you in the friend zone.